What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today we are recording the metagame discussion for the Salt Lake City Regional Championships coming up this weekend. This will be the final major event in North America prior to Silver Tempest coming out. So we just have these two major events in North America for the Lost Origin standard format. But luckily, the Silver Tempest doesn't look like it's going to shake up too much. So we'll essentially be playing Lost Origin 1.5 for the next couple majors after this. So if you're attending SLC, you're attending some winner boxes, or you just like to keep up with the metagame, this will be a great discussion for you. I have with me 4 guests today, and I've picked these guests based on a couple of factors. We have Henry, since he is a great player from Australia. So he's going to have some different perspectives, and his tournament scene looks a lot different than ours. We have Juancho. So Juancho, where are you from?
I'm from the Philippines.
From the Philippines, but you compete
Yes.
in the US.
Sometimes.
So again, a very different perspective as well that I can't wait to hear some of your thoughts. Rahul, who is our day 2 regular of the discussion today, and then we also have Patrick Wall, who is an aspiring day 2 regular. So I think Pat is kind of on the same level as a lot of you guys out there that are listening, where Pat is trying to break into getting day 2s, break into those top tournament placements, and he's really studying the meta. So I wanted to give kind of a voice that reflects what a lot of the audience is thinking in our discussion today. So I kind of already introduced you guys, but Henry, why don't you say hello to the people, tell them a little about yourself.
Sure. Hey guys, I'm Henry. I'm a Pokemon player from Australia, and you may know me from winning the 2019 World Championships. It's been a few years since then, but I'm still playing Pokemon.
Love to hear it. Poncho?
Hey guys, I'm Juancho. I stream on Twitch as Primetime Wizard TV. I've been playing the game for 10 years. I'm the Philippine national champion, the last one.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I've made day 2 in Baltimore, and I'm a caster for TPC as well.
Okay, beautiful. Rahul?
Hey guys, I'm Rahul. I've been playing for 11 years now, and you may know me from just constantly being in day 2, but have never won anything. So I just kind of do my best.
And Pat?
Hey, I'm Patrick Wall. As Luke said, I am aspiring day 2 regular. I started playing in 2019 and then seriously right around the summer of 2020. Been to a couple regionals, got top 256 at Indianapolis, made top 256 NA at Players Cup, and just like Luke said, just trying to take that next step. Talk to these legends here.
Awesome. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the SLC metagame, what decks we think are going to be good, popular, and everything in between. So I wanted to start out with this question. Are there any decks that you would suggest people do not put time into, do not pick up if they're looking to get a safe day 2? Or is pretty much everything in the general metagame day 2able at this point, Rahul?
I think I would avoid Blissey. I know that Blissey is like one of the decks that has been having a couple of splashes on online events, and I think I saw one maybe make day 2 over in Peoria, and I was intrigued myself, and I gave it like a couple of games, and I was like, okay, it's still just what it used to be. It's nothing special, and it feels like a little bit of a trap. And I think if you're going to play something with that kind of like firepower or like aggressive glass cannon build, I just play Regis at that point.
Any disagreements on the Blissey?
No, I agree completely, especially, and I guess I'm going to extend this to like other tank decks as well, because they all struggle with Giratina, and that's okay at the moment, because, or like for Peoria, because people hadn't quite either A, figured out Giratina or learned how to play it properly. But now people are starting to, and the deck is, which obviously we'll touch on, but absolutely like a contender for BDIF. And so I wouldn't go in with a shaky Giratina matchup.
Okay. Any disagreements for Blissey, or just agreement?
I don't know if I want to argue with these two guys, but no, I kind of like tank decks at the moment. I don't know. I guess just playing Hyper Potion in general, and just tank decks seem to be the right spot to put the Hyper Potion rather than taking it into like random Mew deck. Just because again, it has a really good Lost Box engine. I think it's a good play for like getting into day 2. Maybe you won't win, but getting to day 2 is not too bad.
Yeah, so personally, I saw that Blissey was hitting its peak in online events, and I think if it didn't hit that peak, it could have been a really great play for SLC, because then you would also have the free wins of Miltank factored in. But
Yep.
you'll see like Goodra decks putting an Aegislash in, maybe people that were playing a deck that auto loses to Miltank, they might switch to a very similar deck that doesn't auto lose to Miltank, just in case they come up against these Blissey players. And once that comes into the mind of players, then that deck just loses a couple points for me because of that. Are there any other decks that you would say maybe stay off of if you're trying to just have a reasonable chance of day 2? Any risky decks or any other decks that might be a trap, like Rahul and Henry think Blissey might be?
I have one.
Okay.
It might be I think Zoroark V-Star is a trap. I just say that because I think the deck is a little awkward. It has a really bad like Palkia Lost Zone matchup, but then it made top 8 in Peoria. So it's like I'm sure a lot of people are gonna try it out, but I feel like that's a trap. I just have a feeling. Again, having a bad matchup against those two decks seems a little rough.
Yeah, when I saw Zorik's Palkia matchup early in testing, I'd put the deck right down. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, Zoroark is weird in that it really just kind of abuses Arceus decks, and Arceus is already kind of in a weird spot. So it really depends. I almost wonder if there being more Blissey might bring the Duraludons of the world back out, and I wonder if that could end up impacting Zoro. I don't know. Everybody, I think, was ready to write off Zoroark, and I don't know if anybody really saw that in Peoria.
Yeah, I would have put money on it that it did not top 32, let alone top 8.
I agree. I was very surprised when I saw not one but 2 Zoroarks in top 16. I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, I think it was just a beat stick deck, and some people built consistent enough or got lucky enough. And for the first tournament of the meta, maybe they came up against a bunch of piles that weren't ready for a consistent beat stick. But like you guys were alluding to, people have had more time to sit with the set now and sit with the Lost Zone engine. And I think that means that there's less room for those kind of decks to sneak in that are just winning based off of being a little more consistent or a little more oppressive with the damage output.
Oh yeah, I agree.
So inversely of that, what are the decks that you think have the best chance of day 2ing? Now, Pat, I'm going to ask you this one and put you on the spot a little bit. So what do you think are the decks that give you the best chance of making day 2, looking at the metagame right now?
I mean, to me, it's almost deceptively simple in that it's Giratina and Palkia. I mean, when you strip away everything else, when you zoom out from the metagaming, and even if you're looking at the metagaming, they're the 2 best decks. People are really starting to figure out how to build Tina optimally, or at least in a way that works in the current meta. They're both going to give you more consistency than a lot of the stuff going on right now. And you know, if you're in my boat and you're just kind of like, well, I like playing this or I like playing that, but I really want to stop messing around and make day 2, I think you really have to kind of start with those 2 and give them a real chance.
Rahul, what do you think?
I agree. I think Tina and Palkia have both been like far and away the best 2. Like I think you can lump Lost Box into Tina, but also I think there's like a lot of nuance to playing Lost Box and a lot of resource management that you don't kind of realize that you made a mistake until like 3 turns later because you lost on that one energy that you might have needed. So I feel like I can't really lump that in. And I think a close third would be Mew. I think all 3 are like very powerful. It's just that Mew is getting collateral, like as we saw in Peoria. A lot of Reggies and a lot of Drapion made their way into lists. I don't know if that like similar level of hate will exist in Salt Lake, but like Mew was one of like my top 2 had I gone to Peoria.
Wancho?
For me, it's just Palkia, just straight up. I mean, it's tried and tested at this point. People know how to play it. I feel like, yeah, it has the best chance at making day 2, and you have a lot of resources at this point to really study that deck. So Palkia for sure.
And Mr. Brand.
Palkia or Giratina for sure. They're two best decks, incredibly difficult to counter. Giratina is harder to counter than Palkia because Palkia has kind of sketchy tank matchups. But obviously it's still Palkia. And I think you're ever so slightly favored into Giratina, which is a little bit of a consideration. But if you play both and you play well, there's zero reason you shouldn't day two with either of them.
That sounds great. So what if for some people out there, they haven't picked up Palkia and Celio on all format, but they want a deck that has a favored matchup into some of the top decks? What kind of decks do we start suggesting to people that can't pick up Palkia with a few days to learn, but the deck they were testing does not feel like it's going to be great into the meta? What are some of the lower skill floor decks that might be a consideration for? Looks like it has a pretty good matchup spread. This could day two. Rahul?
I think off the top of my head, I would say like Arc plus something would be like a good low skill ceiling, just beat stick, very one dimensional, like either Arctina or like Arc Pika towards a lesser extent, but like maybe like an Arctina plus like a 1/1 line of something, or like I'm not a huge fan of the tanks, but Arc Goodra could be really good. But I'd probably just like hand someone Arctina and just say like get in there.
Wancho, how about you?
I think my answer would have to be Mew. Just drawing cards seems really good, and you just have to dodge those Drapions.
Yeah, this might be an okay tournament to bring Mew back out because it didn't perform overly well in Peoria. So if people are wanting to beat Lost Box and Tina and Palkia and Miltank, maybe those Drapions get cut for a plethora of other cards that people are trying to counter other things with.
Yeah, 100%.
Pat, so what do you think? You're going into this event, you're looking to day two. What's on your mind with what kind of decks can you pick up and play if the metagame calls for it, and which ones do you think are most likely to come up in maybe like the 2 days prior to the event? What decks are you thinking, yeah, if the meta looks good for this, I could pick it up?
Yeah, we're already seeing just from online events that Arctina is kind of starting to see a rise in popularity and is doing pretty well. Just from the initial online best of one Trainer Hill data, it looks like it has a pretty favorable matchup spread. And unlike playing something like AI, you don't have to really worry about the Teleon engine. You just slap down a Bieber, it's convenient, and you can draw off that. So if you're not sure, I talked to a lot of players, even ones who've been playing for a long time, who still really don't feel comfortable with the Teleon engine. It's a lot of decisions. It could be a lot of clunk in your deck. So if you don't feel like you have enough time with Palkia, I think Rahul nailed it. You just pick Arceus plus look at the back of your binder or grab Tina, and Starbirth will hard carry you for a lot of the tournament.
Yeah, Arceus, Bibarel, Marnie Path. We've talked about it for a while. Those cards seem like a recipe for success. How about you, Henry?
Yeah, I agree. Arctina, like Marnie Path, if you're, I think, probably a bit newer. But if you've been playing for a bit longer and you're just kind of time starved, like you don't have the practice on Palkia and you don't have the practice on Giratina, then I'd probably look at Reggie's if your sequencing is good. It takes a lot of sequencing. Like it's deceptively difficult because you actually have to get going. But you've got a good matchup spread into those decks that you don't have the skill to play. So your matchups against Palkia and Giratina are fine, and it's also good on day one because the matchups are really difficult for the other side to play. So the matchup's probably 50-50 if they play it perfectly. And so if they don't, if you play it some early rounds on day one, then Reggie's is a really solid pick.
Awesome.
Now I really want to play Reggie's.
It does still brick, but it gives you the best chance you haven't been playing that much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're talking about these two decks, and across the board, I think all four of you said Palkia and Tina, right? Like Comfy Tina and Palkia and Teleon as the two best decks in format, best decks to succeed with everything. Does that if we're saying that, you know, a couple thousand views are on this video, and then people on Twitter are saying those are the best decks, maybe another meta discussion says those are the best decks, is there ever a world where people counter those decks or are so prepared for those decks that it now makes you not want to play those decks, Rahul? Or are
I
they
think
just
it
so
has to
good?
take
Are they just
it has to take so much for me to like jump off of like these big power level decks, or like the stake of the tournament or something has to be like I want a high roll variance. Like this feels like that one format for like 3 months where we had Pikarom, Zap Beasts, and Zoroark being like the top three dogs, and they kind of triangulated each other, and there was like people tried to build other stuff to kind of counter those three, but you could be a good player, pick one of those three, and see reasonable success. And I think we're in a similar metagame where if you understand how these two decks specifically, and then Mew as a third, like ebb and flow properly into the metagame, then you can win games purely because you know how to play those matchups better than the other people.
Any disagreements?
Luke,
No,
it sounds like you're asking us if we should be playing Arc with Flying Peak and Tina.
Yeah, on one deck. Throw in an SP on VMAX for good measure.
Yeah.
There you go.
So any disagreements there, or are these decks just actually that good that you don't worry about them getting too popular?
I mean, I agree 100% with Rahul. Like, if 1,000 people see this video and all that, if people prepare for Palkia and Giratina, I don't think that whatever that deck is that counters both of them is even that consistent to make me want to drop off of these. You know, just play the most consistent form of Palkia or Tina, and you should still do well, even if they're trying to specifically counter you, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. So we're expecting a lot of Palkia and Teleon and Giratina then, I'd say, if we think they're this good. Yes or no? Are we expecting a lot of them, Rahul? Yeah. Thumbs up if we're expecting a lot of them at the tournament, like 10% or more meta shares. Okay.
Oh yeah, easily.
Okay. Perfect. So let's get into the actual talking about the meta share now. So I'm going to pull up this spreadsheet on the screen for the lovely viewers, and I sent this to you prior to the video. So this is the breakdown of the Peoria Regional Championships Masters metagame, courtesy of RK9 Labs. So we have the first couple decks up here at the top had a meta share. Kyurem Palkia was 16% of day one. That was 173 people on it. We had Giratina Comfy at 12%, which was over 100 players. And then Mew VMAX at 10% with over 100. And then Palkia at 9% with exactly 100 players. Palkia and Teleon. And then the winning deck, Lost Box Sableye Charizard, at 6%, just under that. At the fifth most popular deck. So Kyurem Palkia was the most popular deck at Peoria Regionals. Was this a surprise? Anybody can jump in.
No, I don't think so. It's all of this data is really interesting, and you have to look at it through different lenses. But Kyurem Palkia is two things. It's very linear. It hits huge numbers, but it's also fairly simple to play. And so it doesn't take a ton of time to optimize your gameplay of it. And also, as is tradition, the first day of the format, a more linear, consistency focused deck will typically do better. Think like Reshizard, like LAIC, like everything like that. It's always the way you should approach a tournament. And so something like Kyurem Palkia, where it's pretty easy to figure out a strong list straight away. It's got a massive amount of HP, does pretty well into blind metas. And there was a little bit of Lost Box hype, and obviously the big HP can sometimes get over that deck. So I think it was pretty reasonable, and you see it's got a pretty measly conversion rate, but it makes sense for the amount of people that played it.
Yeah, for sure. So what I've been thinking going into SLC is that Kyurem Palkia and Palkia and Teleon will do a little bit of a flip-flop. And we'll see Palkia and Teleon go up to that 15%-ish range, and Kyurem maybe drop to the 5 to 10% range. Is there any disagreement on that assumption? Okay, so Kyurem Palkia should still be played, but probably not as much.
I think also people were high on the Penguin Hope.
Yeah.
that Empoleon did something, and it didn't.
Well,
And so hence the conversion rate, and it'll drop off now.
that's another
because of that.
thing. Like I was mentioning about Blissey earlier, if Blissey didn't come out before the tournament, if Empoleon was the secret tech that everybody showed up with 2 of and nobody expected it, it probably would have destroyed a lot of the Lost Box players if they weren't prepared with Path to the Peak and Canceling Cologne and 4 escape ropes and stuff like that. It could have
Sure.
actually done damage, but it was just a meta call that everybody knew about, deeming it borderline useless.
Yeah.
So
I remember tuning into the stream a couple times, and I think every single time, like I think both of Michael Pramot's games I saw, he opened like against an Empoleon, and he still won those games. So I
yeah.
was like, okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
People had time to prepare against it and whatnot. Pat, let me ask you, anything about the top 10 or so decks on this meta share that were surprising to you when you saw it broken down?
I don't think I'm the first to say this, but I really thought that the Goodra conversion rate was interesting.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, Arceus
think-
Goodra V-Star, 31 people played it, 10 of them made day 2.
Yeah, and like Henry said, I think a lot of that is a function of deck is super linear. Deck has one thing it wants to do. Lost Box was, or Lost Zone stuff was pretty hyped. I mean, it does pretty well into that. To me, that's the thing that really stuck out the most. But I also think it's gonna increase in popularity and do way worse.
Oh yeah.
At SLC.
Yeah. Henry, what do you think about Arceus Goodra as a deck? Is there ever a reason to play it?
It's a pretty solid Palkia matchup.
And a good
Sounds
Sable
pretty
Zard
reasonable.
matchup, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good Sable Zard matchup. The Hyperpot's obviously put in a lot of work. It didn't have a great one early on against the Horn versions, but
Right.
now that they've gone to Tord version, it's not like it's much better. I think it's fine, but again, the Giratina matchup is shaky because it's one of those decks where, and you'll find this a lot, if you're trying to counter Giratina through tech cards rather than or through counters rather than like raw power, it doesn't really work because what if they play this or what if they play that? Like if they play one Lost Blower, then Parasol doesn't work, or if they play, a Stadium, then that doesn't work. So I think it's a decent day 2 option, but I wasn't entirely surprised about it, I guess.
Awesome. Juancho, anything you were surprised about from this Peoria meta share, whether it's the day 1 meta share or their day 2 conversion rates, anything like that?
No, I mean, honestly, I have to say the same thing. Just the Arc Goodra shocked me a little bit. The 30% conversion rate.
Mhm.
Yes, there's only a 31 count, but you can imagine like out of those 31 people, 30% were happy. So, the Palkia Inteleon, just how consistent it is again with the 100 count, right? So that's a pretty good size to get this amount of data, and with a conversion rate of 24%.
Yeah,
think it just goes to show.
20.50. Oh yeah, no, you're right, 24%. Yeah, and 20%. 1 out of every 5 decks in day 2 was Palkia and Talion.
Yeah, I mean, that was shocking, and it's good data. Well, no, sorry, it's not shocking. It's expected, but it's just nice to see the proof with the data for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Rahul, anything that stuck out to you for this data?
Obviously, I didn't end up going to Peoria, so I kind of was like a little bit on the back foot of like kind of not paying attention so much. So I was pretty shocked to see Reggie up there actually, because I saw a lot of like good groups of players end up bringing it, and like as I started thinking about it more, it made a lot of sense. Why it was really good into this metagame, but it's still seeing the 25% of the Reggies move into day 2 was pretty impressive also because the deck is prone to breaking probably like once every like 5 games. And there, like Henry said earlier, there's a lot of like small sequencing things you have to do to kind of optimize the gameplay, or you will lose on those small margins. You win or lose on small margins with Reggie. So it was pretty like interesting to see. At some point, I think in day 1, when I saw the Reggies doing well, in my mind, I actually thought at some point that like half of Top Cut would be Reggie. The meta was so good, I said like I think 4 of the 8 decks in Top 8 will probably be Reggie, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I mean, 8 of them made top 32. I believe.
I think they were all very, very close. Like, I think the last couple rounds they started petering out.
Yeah. Kid placed 9th, I believe, with it, so he just bubbled out of top 8. Yeah, Reggie's was kind of like a last minute meta call, I think. Just seeing, okay, definitely no one's respecting this deck, so as long as we run hot, we have matchups out the wazoo in our favor. So, yeah, I definitely think Reggie was a good, like, meta call deck. It wasn't a deck that you run games with for 2 weeks and prepare with. It's like, okay, night before Reggie's, yeah, let's do it. So there are a couple decks here that were not very popular that have garnered more hype. We already mentioned Arceus Goodra. It was less than 3% of the metagame. But before we really talk about these decks that might move from 1% to 5% or 8% to 5%, Rahul, when you're looking at these meta shares, at what point do you stop caring about decks? Like, obviously, if we look down this list, we care about Cure and Palkia. It was 16% of the field. We care about Giratina, Mew, Palkia and Teleon, Lost Box Sablezard. Where does it stop? At what point do you say that deck is 1 out of 25 people? It's not even going to be on my mind.
For me personally, I probably stop after the 5th most played deck. Like the top 5 are usually what I'm considering, because like I think the question I ask myself is, out of 9 rounds, I don't even think about 14, 15, whatever, just out of 9 rounds, how many of this deck do I expect to hit? And that's where I start with my tournament prep. And so obviously, while Arc Gudra is lower on the list, I have to still respect that its conversion rate was very high. So I have to like factor it differently, but I also have to look at the top 5 decks that were played and kind of start from there, I think is where I'd go.
So Pat, being somebody that's newer to the competitive circuit and everything, how do you feel about that? Do you find yourself caring about the decks that are down at the 3%, 2%, 4% range of the meta shares? And what do you think about this? What do you think about what Rahul said? And do you try to change your perspectives on this at all?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you don't go into it with the perspective of a pro player, you're doing yourself a disservice. I think for me personally, when I'm starting prep or deciding what I want to play, so for this tournament, you're looking at the pure results. I probably look at the top 10, depending on your comfort level prior to the tournament. So for example, I've played Arceus something at every tournament since we've been back. So I can look at something like Goodra or Duraludon or Tina, and say, yeah, I feel like I could pick this up and figure it out pretty quickly. The other stuff you want to work on more. But as far as what you're going to hit, I mean, this is like the Zoroark conundrum, right? It's like, oh, my deck takes a hard loss to Zoroark, but am I actually going to hit it? Do I actually respect this deck? Or Blissey, you're seeing a lot of people now talking about that. I think maybe I would work backwards and I'd say, all right, here's the decks that I like. Am I comfortable taking an L 1 out of 9 rounds if I hit this deck?
Yeah. Henry, what do you think about that?
It's pretty solid. I think there's a couple things. First off, I was going to SLC, I'd be playing Giratina, so I wouldn't really be caring about my matchups apart from Palkia, because I can beat everything on the list. But when it comes to actual numbers, I think I wouldn't really pay too much attention to it. I think that qualitative data and like the qualitative factors are more important than quantitative here. So thinking about like how decks do into each other and what you think people might do, what might pick into things. So I don't think that this stuff is as relevant seeing what did well, but rather and worrying about that, but rather thinking how people will adapt and what's the meta's going on. And well, if you think this is a bad deck, like let's pick one from the list. Blissey Meltank. Okay. So if you pick Blissey and you think, all right, do I need to respect Blissey? And if you think, well, Blissey loses to everything, and then I'm not saying it does, but like for the sake of it, so no one good should play Blissey. So if I win the first 3 rounds, I probably will never see Blissey for the rest of the day, and so I'm not going to worry about Blissey. And you have to take that gamble because like you're not really playing out of 9 rounds, you're playing out of the first 3. And as long as you go EXO the first 3, you're probably going to avoid a lot of the decks that essentially not as good.
A lot of the fringe decks that you would be worried, do I need this counter so I don't lose to a pile?
Yes. Unless all the other decks lose to the pile, and then you might need the counter too.
Okay. Very good, very good. Let me go over here and see my questions. Okay, so are there any oh, I'm sorry, Wancho, I didn't ask you that question. Where do you stop caring about the deck's meta percentages? Do you care more about their day 2 conversions? Do you care more about their day 1, or something like one of our other guests had said maybe?
I agree with pretty much everyone here. Like, you look at the top 10, but at the same time, I like to use not only this data, right? Well, yes, you look at the top 10 here, but then meta, because of the nature of how the game is played right now, there's a lot of online tournaments. Meta does evolve as well. So I also, I take into account what people are also playing online and then match it with this. Like, I personally am afraid of Blissey. Sometimes winning those first 3 rounds are the hardest.
Mhm.
So I'm not one to lose a round early and have to work my way back. And it's at that point you're gonna run into decks like the Blissey deck, right? So yeah, again, I think it's looking at this data, looking at online data, but I think if you're lazy, if you're not lazy in general, but the main thing I guess I look at is always just the top 8 results, right? That will always dictate like what people are probably gonna play, right? Like in this Lost Boxes 6th, I expect that to jump up to like top 3 or something, top 5 at least.
Okay,
So,
cool.
yeah.
Great. So my last general question for you guys, are there any common mistakes you think you're seeing in deck choice or in deck lists for any specific decks? Maybe you're seeing, I don't know, Palkia and Teleon play no Marnie when it should play Marnie, or you're seeing Arceus Giratina decks not playing Drapion when they should. Things like of that nature. Anything that you're seeing trends even in the meta game with certain deck lists where they're not including things. One great example, as Henry pointed out, the Lost Boxes were kind of all playing Echoing Horns prior to Tord's list. And then they started net decking Tord's list, so now there's no more Echoing Horns. Kind of things like that. Anybody that wants to jump on it?
Sure. I'll start. A couple things. If you're playing Empoleon in any of your decks, you're playing 58, 59 cards. That thing is so unbelievably bad. It's just you get in this placebo effect where it seems like it's doing something because your opponent isn't drawing many cards, but then you just lose because you have an Empoleon on your board eventually later on, and you're like, oh, it did something, but I still lost for some different reason. It's like, no, it's Empoleon. And the other thing as well is like on a similar thing, 2 more short ones. Lost Box, don't cut to 3 path. Either you play 4 or you play 0. You choose to respect Empoleon or you don't. I think playing 3 is silly. It's a high quantity counter. You have to draw it frequently if you want it to work. And it's the same thing. Like, you want to spam it down in matchups that aren't Empoleon as well. So 4 or 0 on that. Either respect it or you don't. And then in a regular Giratina Comfy, I think for the love of God, play Capture Energy. That card is so good. It just gives you more flexibility because you're not forced to just VIP pass for your basics early on. You can play more flexible in the mid game, especially against like Lost Box, where like you need to use Cramorant multiple times. Gives you more ways to go Rod, Capture, Cramorant again, and just it gives you more flexibility in how you want to play.
Great, thank you, Henry. Who wants to go next?
I can step in.
Okay.
I agree with the Empo statement for sure. I think that's like probably the biggest one. I think Empo has been proven time and time again that it does absolutely nothing, and it will lose you more games than it does win. And I think my general rule of thumb, if you're going to play Mew this weekend, especially the DTE version, is make sure you have multiple forms of healing or ways to deal with Lost Box, because that matchup should be very easy for Mew, in my opinion. Like the Tord box, like it should be very easy if you're playing, I don't know, a copy of Crystal Cave, Crystal Cave plus a Hyper Potion, plus a Cheryl, plus a Volo. I don't care. Like, play one of those cards. Like, I think Volo is the most underrated card in the list.
Yeah,
I would
Ian
play,
Rob's
like,
list was what
yeah.
I would have played if I attended Peoria. with the Volo
It's
and the
very
Lost
strong.
Cities and stuff.
And I think if you just don't play healing in Mew, like you're just doing yourself like there's so many matchups where like the healing will go that extra distance. And if you just don't play it, you're gonna just lose.
Man,
Watch out.
yeah, I just want to go next because Rahul beat me to it. I literally have on my notes healing all the things. That was my thing. If you're ever playing a DTE, if you think you can fit in a hyper potion, just buy yourself that extra turn. I think it's worth it, especially in Mew. Like you said, you can switch your switches to the switch card or whatnot. Or play a healing stadium. I even tried out using Champions Festival. Don't do that, but just healing all the things.
Yeah, because Lost Box is counting on all of its damage counters sticking on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Pat, did you have any thoughts or questions or even statements?
Just one for my fellow Goodra enjoyers.
Okay.
Give Path of the Peak a try. We were talking about this earlier, but I really like it against Kyurem. I think it's just kind of generally useful. But otherwise, I mean, the legend said it, right? I mean, Empoleon is a lie. And, listen to those guys.
Awesome. All right, so let's close this one out with 4 decks you expect to see in the top 8 and what you think the 5 decks are that you should prepare to play against in day 1. Let's go, Pat. 4 decks
right.
that'll be in top 8 and the 5 decks that you personally would expect to play in day 1.
All right. So I would say in top 8, you're going to see Palkia and Tina, obviously.
Okay.
I think you'll see Kyurem. I'm going to go with Reggie for my 4th. I feel like I'm gonna go a little spicy.
Okay.
And I would say that the top 5 that you want to prepare for, Tina, Palkia, have an answer to Lost Box, have an answer to Kyurem, and then have an answer to the tanking stuff, or at least have a plan against.
Rahul, same question. 4 decks in top 8 and the 5 you expect to play against in day 1.
I think we'll see Kyurem, Giratina, Palkia, Mew as my 4 in top 8.
Mhm.
And I would do those 4 plus Regis as my 5 that I'll hit in day 1.
No Lost Box?
I think there will be less Lost Box players that perform well, and also like it's like a sort of a personal thing. I don't normally tie very often, so I think Lost Box players will tie. I like to see my games through to completion, so as long as I don't tie in any early rounds, I feel like I can dodge that matchup pretty comfortably.
Very interesting note that maybe some archetypes tie more than others, and if you're playing a deck that doesn't tie, maybe you have a better chance of dodging that archetype.
Right.
Interesting thought. Wancho, same question.
Can I say 4 Mew VMAXs?
No. Well, yeah, you could say 4 Mew VMAXs, and then what 3 are taking up the other 4 spots. So, okay, 50% of top 8 in Wancho's head is Mew VMAX.
No, but yeah, I'm like, just because it didn't do too well in the last regional, I feel like Mew should do well this time. That's my thought. So Mew, Palkia, Kyurem. I'm gonna say the Kyurem Palkia is also gonna be so 4 for my top 8, and then prepare to see in day 1 the Lost Box for sure. I mean, just because it won, I feel like it just should go up there. It for sure, yeah.
Okay. And Henry.
All right, so decks I think you're seeing day 1. I think you're seeing Goodra. You're going to see a drop off of Reggie because I think people are realizing it's Greninja break for better or for worse. So you'll see it drop off of Reggie. Even though I recommended it, I do think it'll drop off. Goodra, and then Lost Box, Palkia, Mew, and Kyurem. I think you're going to see on Giratina, but I can only pick 5. Top 4, you'll see Giratina, Mew, Palkia, and I think that might see like a Lost Box Gate deck make top 8, which we haven't talked about a ton. But there are other single prize gate based decks that I think are a little bit less consistent but have a reasonable power level.
Yeah.
So I think we could see one squeak through to top 8.
I'm glad you brought that up because it completely slipped my mind. I do think that Greninja, in my head, I know it's not as cut and dry at this, but I see Lost Box as Radiant Zard or Radiant Greninja or 2/2 Tina with Radiant Greninja. Those are kind of like the three sections I see of Lost
Hmm.
Box. And I think, just like you said, for the first event, Peoria, more straightforward decks were going to do better. Radiant Greninja Lost Box is not a straightforward deck. It just lends itself to a more toolboxy and more diverse kind of play style, where the deck's going to be a little less consistent and a little less reliable at exacting your strategy the same way every game, but you have more options.
Yep. Celebrations Kyogre, maybe.
Yeah, Celebrations Kyogre, Reggie Gigas with the Twin Energies and Raihan to take out a Kyurem, Crabominable, Raikou V, things like that. So things like we saw in the Singapore Lost Zone box that everybody liked for a day until the Yokohama Lost Zone box came out, and that was Sableye
Yeah.
Charizard. Awesome. So Henry saying that the Goo might be a deck you see in day one.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay, guys. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I wanted to keep this one a little bit short since we just had the Peoria discussion last week. A lot of the same stuff is going to apply, but now we've looked at the meta a little bit clearer. Thank you guys all for being here. And does anybody have any shout outs, sponsors, Twitter, things like that?
Just thanks for having us.
Thank you guys for joining. If you enjoyed watching this video, please subscribe to the channel for daily Pokemon TCG content. You can check out my sponsors, links, things like that in the description down below, and we'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.